Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to say we've come to the moment that I think many people have been looking forward to find out a little bit more from a panel of security experts. And we are going to use this moment just to finish set up, but I'd like to invite all our panelists to join us on the stage, and they are Ioana Surpateanu. Ioana is a political advisor, Working Group Budget and Structural Policies in the European Parliament. Please give her and all of our panelists a round of applause. And Michael Neuber. Ioana. Michael Neuber is from the Bundesverband Digitale Wirtschaft. Please welcome Michael. Dr. Vladimir Nagin, Managing Director of Cellnetrix, who we met yesterday. And Andreas Berz. Hello. Nice to see you. Andreas Berz, who is Director of Business Development for the IIoT in EMEA at Red Lion Controls. Vladimir, good to see you. Andreas, good to see you back. Thank you. Now, so we have Ioana and Michael, Vladimir, and Andreas. The issues that confront us at the moment as an industry are, as we've heard, they are detailed, they are broad-ranging. It is a massive issue. Semantic research says that IoT devices are increasingly being used to carry out botnet-led distributed denial of services, or DDoS attacks. And in fact, there was a big attack, as you may well have read on our site and on others. There was an attack last weekend, which we reported on Monday. Andreas, how can IoT application providers protect themselves and their customers?
Yes, we heard just in the presentation before one possible way, which is a diode. So, and that's also something Red Lion is, as a device manufacturer, is focusing on to, just let the edge devices which are exposed to this danger just not accept external code, or if they accept code, make it such that this code can't be executed. So simply, it can make no harm. So the device may not be intelligent enough or not have the ability to execute dangerous code. And that's maybe one critical aspect.
Vladimir, is there anything you would add from an industry perspective?
Yes, so basically any mobile device can be considered as a potential DDoS target, let's say, so it can be used for this kind of attacks. This is normal, any mobile device. And for the moment, for example, there is a certification initiative from the industry, so it's called Global Certification Forum, and what they do, they certify mobile devices. For the moment, I think thousands of devices were certified. Mobile devices certified, but not all the devices which are on the market, they are certified. In fact, it's, as far as I understand, this is actually just initiative, but for the moment, many manufacturers participate in this initiative. I think it's very important to have this kind of certification, from my point of view, to ensure a high level of security on the device side.
Michael, is there anything from a policy point of view that you see within country it is possible for governments to do to assist this protection?
Well, the government already assisted this by introducing the IT Security Act last year, and this year the EU Commission introduced the IT Cybersecurity Directive, which addresses exactly these questions. It's just right, it's about certification and standardization of processes. We had the same discussion with the data protection or protection of personal data when talking about the data protection regulation that's been introduced in 2015. There we had the same discussion. It was about privacy by design. Now we have a machine-to-machine communication issue coming from IoT and Industry 4.0, and it's about security by design. When you look at the machines communicating with each other. So what our association does, we have set up 2 panels within the association. One that deals with questions of the data economy. It's more like a meta layer of discussion where you discuss all the questions around data possession, data handling compliance, which involves questions of data security. And we have the panel that deals with all the questions and all the business models behind IoT. So we address that from an association's point of view, and trying to getting all the relevant players together. Looking at the IT Security Act, looking at the Cybersecurity Directive, which only declares or only obliges the companies to give alerts, immediate alert once there's a breach, which is only the effect of a machine not being secure enough. So what we try to do in the association is to raise the awareness within the industry and try to go towards these steps to have a certification framework or maybe standards that we can promote.
Ioana, is there anything that we're missing if we only see it at the individual country level? You have the advantage of seeing across borders. How would you describe this threat and the response from government and administration?
Definitely. Going back to what Michael was saying, the Cybersecurity Directive, it's actually called NIS Directive, Network Information Security Directive, and it actually introduces It introduces country capability requirements. So at national level, member states have to import everything the directive sets, and to increase their response efforts and to cooperate more than they have before. Then again, there's a new segment dedicated to wider cooperation between the member states on the matter. You will have NIS national authorities that need to develop action plans and then cooperate with the additional member states, NIS, well, the respective member states NIS authorities. And then there's a CERT response. So, and also the need to inform when there's a security high breach on what they call essential service. And we have seen prior presentations on grids and electric grids and everything that is considered as essential services at national level. Now, going back to IoT, you all mentioned the security of the device per se, but I'm also thinking in an IoT world where everything is embedded with sensors. We all live in a computerized communication world. What matters is also the data that is collected and the central repository where that data is held, because in the end, we might have a secured IoT device, but if the data transmission is not encrypted and someone hacks into it, then I don't think we have achieved much. And the idea is to protect the central repository or to design it in such a way that it only holds public information so that it's not really attractive for someone to hack. And I know for a fact that Stanford is actually working, the computer science team at Stanford is actually working on redesigning what a central repository of data collection is and how it could be so that it's not really a target, that it's not really, it doesn't represent a stimulant for the hackers, because we have to be aware DDoS is not a new
No.
attack. It's actually, if I remember correctly, it was performed 5 years ago. So we're not really speaking of something new on the scene. And we have to know that technology increases exponentially, and so does the hacking ability of people that want to engage in such activities. And if someone wants to really dedicate his or her time into hacking into a device or a system, they will do it. It's it's as simple, not as simple, but it always happens.
Yeah. Michael, I mean, IoT and the industrial IoT has mentioned security for some time, but there hasn't been until last year and this year, there hasn't been quite the cohesive action of the various industry associations and government bodies at regional and national and even local levels. Do you feel that we are now catching up with where we should be, or are we still playing catch up always on the hackers?
Good question. What I notice and what I notice from our work in the association is that the market pressure is there to address these issues and to get into dialogue with the stakeholders, with politicians, and with other players within the industry. So that's why we set up these panels, because it was something that, of course, we endorsed, but on the other hand, it was asked for. So, and that has a reason. And the reason is that there's market pressure, and as you noticed, there were some. You're right. DDoS attacks are just attacks. They're not really the hacks that we are talking about, where data flows out of machines and networks. So, but it has raised the awareness that the recent issues have raised the awareness. So that's why I think we're on a good path. It's you're right. Especially the digital industry, it was for many years, and it's also a political question, because this was on the table then, which was the data protection regulation. That was a main focus that we had for the past 3 years, and now the digital transformation is evolving. So new issues and new questions arise, and that's why I think it's still a path we walk on.
Yeah, I'd like to get the industry view in a second, but Ioana, you had something you wanted to add.
We have a major disadvantage at EU level. We don't really have a competitive cybersecurity market at the moment. What has been done in that direction, it's in incipient phase, and I think it's a great idea and opportunity for politicians, regulators, industry, and all the actors that are interested in this, is the so-called contractual PPP on cybersecurity. So it brings together industry and regulators in an attempt to unlock the potential of the EU market, and to create a high-tech industry, because we don't have that really either, and then to find a way to secure it. So this contractual PPP is new. There's also in the vaunted, I think, by now, Horizon 2020 research program that has over 80 billion available at EU level for this programming period. 5 million euros dedicated to research R&I in cybersecurity. So I think we've acknowledged the need to move faster in that direction at EU level, and to sort of catch up with what Asia and US are doing. It's harder for us because we're fragmented. We don't really have a VC model. We lack investment. We lack skills, unfortunately. But I think we're on the right track.
There will probably be a long queue of people wanting to talk to you about that 80 million immediately after this discussion.
No, sorry 80 billion for the whole, so that means the current programming period, which is 2014 to 2020. And it's the biggest EU level research program, and it has money, it has funds for a lot of, not only, I wish there were 80 billion for cybersecurity alone. No, it's just 500 million.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear that there is that spend going on. Are you seeing these progressions within industry, Vladimir? Is this something that you are happy with? You're seeing this integration of activity?
From my point of view, for the moment, I clearly feel that there is security is a very important point for the moment, and we really, I really feel that there is some acceleration in this area, and there are a lot of activities. And I wouldn't say that we are trying to catch up with hackers. I think it's a wrong approach. I think for the moment there are areas. If we consider, for example, mobile communications, from the beginning, mobile communications were more or less secure because some security measures were implemented from the beginning. Or if you consider like industrial IoT, industrial area, then here we are far behind, let's say, because original approach was functional based, and standards were developed in the 70s, and they were focused on implementation of specific functional, specific features, and security wasn't taken into the account. And now we really catch up in these areas. But I see a lot of activities in these areas, and I think we are on the track. That's my.
Andreas, is this your understanding as well?
Yes, and I'd like to add something to it, because you were asking, so who's the leader?
Yeah.
Are the hackers first, or is the industry developing the tools against the hacks first? And I don't think that hackers are more creative than the industry security companies. So it's not always a hacker that invents something and then we need to fix it. But what is the difference? I think the big difference is that hackers work much more collaborated. So they have a community. They use tools that and the industry, the industry needs to learn this as well. In the past, the companies really worked on their own concepts and try to fix everything by themselves and to protect their knowledge. And we need to work together, really, to on the security side very much more than in any other topic.
That seemed to be the situation, particularly a year or two ago, where every time I was wanting to talk to individual companies about their response to the security threat, the cybersecurity threat, there was a discussion about what they were doing in isolation. But there was less discussion about how they were working in collaboration with their ecosystem. And I think we are past that. I think now we are seeing the industry proving a good deal more mature and working in these partnerships to create secure end-to-end solutions. But I still come across occasional companies who would like to outsource their security. And I find it quite startling that this is even contemplated. I mean, do you find this? Is this, am I alone in stumbling across this, and shall I go and kick a few backsides? Or are you coming across this as well?
No, security is such a big topic and so complex that, you can't, as a smaller company, which a lot of automation companies have, not the big size, really think about outsourcing this topic completely, because they simply,
it's too big.
Can't cope it. But I don't think that's a good idea, because you need this knowledge in house. But on the other side, it is mandatory to seek outside consultancy and advice and help. There are expertise. You can't really cover the whole topic, so you will always need external companies to help you with this.
Yeah.
But you can't just rely completely on others.
Ioana, you wanted to comment on that. There's another microphone there if you need.
I don't really have that much input in that area. Just 2 points. One of them, if you outsource, you need to have where to choose from. And right now at EU level, I mean, the European market is not so varied, I would say. So we need to have competition, and then the cost will drop as well. So one of the previous speakers was referring to the fact that it's expensive to ensure the right amount of security in a system, to embed that in a system, because you don't really have competition at EU level. We need to have a competitive cybersecurity market. We need to have a security solution offering market at EU level. That's what I wanted to say. And the second thing is that related to outsourcing, I don't know if you're aware, but the second NSA contractor was arrested yesterday. It comes from the same consultancy that Edward Snowden came from, and NSA outsourced its security services. This is what happened, and they've arrested a second individual yesterday. Actually, speaking about outsourcing, and if the NSA hasn't been able to do the right due diligence, and there are two people from the same consultancies, that it's not really sure what he wanted to do, whether or not he was trying to use it as Snowden has, but still he withheld info on how the American government uses to hack other governments. So what digital code they use to hack into other governments. So yeah, there are, how should I say it, risks in engaging in outsourcing security.
Vladimir, when you're talking to new customers, is it immediately understood, is it implicit in what they say to you that they understand there is such a wide variety of threats and such a wide variety of security needs? For example, if you've got a connected vending machine, your security requirement is very different from a life-critical connected health device, such as a cardiac monitor. When your customers come to you, are they looking at a menu of options that they could choose from? Are they expecting something off the shelf, or is it readily understood by them that they could have a variety of different options?
So basically, as it was already mentioned in the presentation today, actually security is a very complex task, and it's very difficult to develop a unique solution which can ensure protection against all threats, because definitely customers, of course, when they come to us, they have some ideas what should be protected, they have some ideas what are the threats, they have some ideas about the assets, and very important about impact. But of course, they don't have the complete concept, and it takes a lot of time. It takes, of course, sometimes it's our task to evaluate different kind of threats, and also to evaluate different, let's say, vectors of attacks, and finally, the decisive factor for the customers, actually the impact. What is the impact which this specific attack, specific threat can bring? And definitely it's very important to say that there's security levels, they are different. You're right that vending machines, so that's the threats. If, for example, attacker attacks vending machine, then the costs associated with this attack is pretty low. If hacker attacks power plant, for instance, and attacks a very big SCADA network, right, then the impact is much, much higher. And definitely this should be taken into account. But definitely we are, for example, focusing more on protecting endpoints, right? So we are taken as a partner in the bigger project. For example, if there is a project to implement security measures for a power plant, this is a very, very big task. It includes many operations, includes many partners, Therefore, from my point of view, of course, it's very important from the beginning to identify potential economic impact, and based on that, we can identify different threats and then implement specific countermeasures for that. This is our approach.
Andreas, is it a straightforward process to go through finding the right sort of solutions, or does it take time?
You originally asked if there's a difference between a vending machine and a healthcare device in terms of security, and yeah, I would say it's true, but the difference between the two is not as big as you would think in the first moment. Of course, in the IoT, we always have a bigger picture. So if you take one vending machine, yes, it might not harm if this is hacked. But what if somebody can hack it? He may be able to hack also my 10,000 other vending machines.
Yeah.
And if that happens, my business can be down. So this is critical for me. And it can also be critical for somebody else. So there's impact also not only on myself, it can also impact others. And eventually it can also harm people's life, such as if somebody hacks one healthcare device. So security is in the IoT is always a concern and a high concern. So yeah, as I said originally, the difference between a vending machine and a healthcare device, yes. In the first moment you would say, yeah, we don't care about security so much in the vending machine, but I disagree. It is critical for all devices.
It's the way, possibly the way into further hacks or further risks. Yeah, yeah. Yes, indeed, like what happened with Yahoo. Michael, we've all been talking about risks, but we haven't really identified one of the greatest threats that we all know of, and it isn't often discussed, and that is our own staff within organizations. A disgruntled employee is far more likely to be the cause of an intrusion than an outside hacker, in many cases, not in all, but in many cases. Is there a way in which administrations can assist and can guide and teach and instruct the companies concerned to understand this and to look out for the right kind of threats?
Yeah, I mean, it's been mentioned before by Ioana and by the last speaker that you know, a human being is a human being, and you can only set up some kind of guidance and measurements and kind of best practice standards within your company, and that's what also the BVDW is promoting, is give advice on how to maybe formulate guidelines for stuff which includes some legally binding requirements that you can also enforce, you know, by labor law means. So you should have some kind of sanctions. You should make very clear what the business model of your company is, and what the employee, which part it plays within this whole system. And so we've done this with you probably know it from social media guidelines, same topic, but some other issue. But there are guidelines in the market, and also the BVDW has issued some guidelines on how to instruct and maybe also educate staff and employees on certain issues.
Ioana, do you want to add anything to that before I ask our colleagues?
Yes, actually, in the parliament we have second factor authentication. It's easier, it's a controlled environment, so the IT we cannot operate our home devices, the devices that are not, we don't acquire them, we don't receive them from the parliament. We cannot, and we cannot access the parliament website or our own email, etc., without second factor authentication. And I think for a company, this is easy to do, right? I mean, you just impose this. It's a controlled environment. You can impose this or other security measures. And another thing, yeah, it's true. Hacking evolves most. I mean, it's easier to hack within a social engineering context. Technology does not evolve in a vacuum. It's not encapsulated. It evolves in a social context. Of course, you could say that humans are much more inclined or are much more likely to be responsible without their knowledge, responsible of enabling such an attack. And then there's another factor, user responsibility. It's not that difficult. We need to be aware of what we are using, of what the risks are, not just scroll down, through the privacy statement of when we download an app or etc. So why should we? Because we always blame the system. We would like to have an infallible system. We would like to have something that will always work. It's unbreachable. What about us? What about our responsibility? So I think there's a combination of factors. And again, I state it's way easier to impose this in a controlled environment, like a company or, in my case, a public institution.
Yeah.
You just need to take the right steps and implement it.
Set the rules. Andreas, anything that you would add to this?
Yes, I completely agree that you need to educate staff and people and also create the environment to make it easy for the people. And I suppose all attendants here are well-educated people, but if I ask now everybody, how often did you change your online banking password the last 6 months? We would probably advise, be surprised. That may not happen often enough. Yeah. And so we all know that we need to do it, but most of the people are not doing it. And so it's not enough really to rely on the responsibility and the education and all the knowledge of the people. We need mechanisms that simply don't let these errors happen.
So a lot of it is not technology, it's not just technology, it's not just solutions, it's processes, it's getting the right mindset. Is that it?
Yes, and the technology, the devices must be also intelligent so that they can detect if I use certain passwords, or they should not allow, not only like our computers do or websites do, not allow certain combinations of characters, but also it should not be the duty of a single person to think about passwords in terms of IoT, because if I deploy 1,000 devices, so what do? Think myself about 1,000 passwords? That's a task I simply can't do as a human being. So we should not try to put responsibility on people which they can't fulfill. So we need to create mechanisms, implement systems that do this for the people.
But allowing systems to be shipped where the password is set as a default at password is kind of this kind of thing, yes. Or 1, 2, 3, 4 is the kind of thing we should be.
But maybe we should have
preventing.
Sorry, Jim. No, we should have billboards. I mean, we see publicity as we drive on the highway. We should have, don't open an attachment from an unknown source. Change your password every 2. No, I'm serious. I know it sounds a little bit ludicrous, but maybe this is what we should be doing. Not we, you more. It's the industry that should be doing this.
Vladimir, I wanted to look at the effectiveness of security solutions and security measures. All of us in this room are, as Andreas has said, we're educated individuals. We've been talking about security for ages. We know the dangers and we know the pitfalls, but people will still fall into the pitfalls. How do you, in advance of that, how do you measure the effectiveness of your own internal security measures?
Well, actually, I think it's quite a difficult question because I think it's very difficult to benchmark, to estimate, to measure level of security in generic case, because there are different standards. There are like for banking security, for example, for IT security. So for us, for example, we have there is a ISO approach, so-called common criteria evaluation, and this evaluation tries to provide kind of assurance level for different kind of objects. For example, if I would like to protect, specific, like I don't know, a banking card, or I'd like to protect the target of evaluation operating system. So the different target of evaluations, and definitely, and accordingly, there are a lot of different factors which are taken into account. First of all, this system should be developed according to specific guidelines, specific rules. Secondly, there are specific processes which should be implemented by the development company to develop such system. Secondly, there are, of course, there should be specific lifecycle management, bug tracking system, and all these kind of systems implemented. And then there is, at the final stage only, there is security evaluation, which is a small part of the development process, in fact. And based on this very complex evaluation, which includes different components, it's possible to estimate and to assign so-called assurance level. So they vary from level 1 to level 7, the highest. And basically, I don't think that the systems with level 7, with level 6, there are a lot of, like electronic passport, for example, they have this kind of level. Definitely we can speak only about some kind of assurance level, I think, because this is, let's say, a perception how we estimate our system. I don't think it's possible to say that we, let's say, 70% secure or 90% secure. That's from my point of view, because it's very, very complex task, and we should take into account specific application which is under evaluation. Let's say that's our approach.
Michael, do you think there's anything further to add on how to benchmark your own internal success or internal protection?
I'm not an engineer, but what I've taken out of the panel's discussions in our association is that they try to run some vulnerability tests according to ISO 27000, and then find out which level is needed in order to protect certain kinds of data and how to set up processes. What I would like to stress again is it's very crucial for the industry to develop certain standards in this field, especially when it comes to consumer-related IoT. Because what we saw this discussion on with protection of personal data, the industry takes it very seriously, and nevertheless, people, and that's what the last speaker was also already mentioning, is you need trust. If you want to sell a product, if you want to promote a product that's database or that's located in the digital world, the foremost thing you need is trust. Consumer must trust your device or your process or your application, and so it's needed in order to develop your business. Because in the future, and that's why we are stressing this point within our association so much, the Constitutional Court of Germany 2 years ago introduced a new fundamental right, which is the fundamental right on confidentiality and integrity of the information systems, which actually addresses governmental processes, but this is a very crucial point in the discussion. Mostly it's perceived as private companies freely giving away data to some authorities they shouldn't do. It's very important to divide this discussion and to be precise what we are talking about. Private companies in the digital world, they have to handle data, they have to collect data, they have to process data in order to run their business. Yeah. It's a business model. You can't prohibit any company from handling data, from processing data. Of course, it must be secure, and it must be respecting the fundamental rights and the protection of personal data. But the discussion is not about what governments should do in order to keep in order their processes and their authorities. So it's vital for the industry to promote security issues in order to have the trust of the consumers, because they are private. Private companies cannot put you in prison. They cannot, hinder you to leave the country. It's only governments that can do that. And so really that they have to, the discussion has to be very, it's a complex matter, but it has to be precisely on the private sector. And so that's why we stress this topic a lot.
We've talked a lot about the negatives, the downsides, the problems that we've all seen in the industry and elsewhere. So let's end, if we may, on some upscale news. And can we look forward? Can you give me your thoughts? Can I start with you, Ioana, on the kind of technologies that we're already seeing possibly having an impact on security in the years to come? I'm thinking like blockchain. But about artificial intelligence, is there anything that you can see that would this be an area that the EU is already talking about, the Commission is talking about, or should we be concentrating within the industry on this and then come to the regulation for it later?
In technology, we cannot afford that. I mean, the pace of development is huge. We cannot just focus on what we can deal with at the moment and then wait, because by the time we realize what we need to do, it's already late. Plus, you have to take into account that it takes a lot of time to come up with a regulation. Like, for instance, GDPR, because you've mentioned it a lot, took 5 years from the onset to finalize, and now it will take 2 more years to be effectively implemented. I mean, it starts implementing in 2018. I am a personal fan of blockchain technology. You've asked if it can provide more security. Well, actually, the transaction via the blockchain network is as secure as the digital signatures that secure it, and the digital signatures are based on hard math problems. So until we have quantum computing, you probably know this better than me, we're safe in that area, or because Accenture, for instance, decided that they want to edit the blockchain platform, etc. There are many discussions. EU is looking at this, definitely. There was a report a few months ago on the awareness of the place blockchain technology is already occupies in the tech world, and not only. There's no envisaged regulation at the moment, EU-level regulation, because I think we need to see what's going on. We need to see how much we can regulate. And for artificial intelligence, I've read some articles just recently about how, IBM, for instance, has developed a cloud version of its Watson cognitive technology, and to test how it could, for instance, detect cyber attacks, or if you can teach a computer to outsmart a human into how they deal with cyber attacks. But for the moment, I don't think we're there yet. No. So there is potential. Definitely, for the moment, I think there's a hybrid we can use. Not me, people who actually deal with cyber attacks can use AI and super powerful computers as a tool to help them in their endeavor. But definitely we're keeping our eyes on these.
Yeah, Micah, if there's anything you'd like to add. It's a hard question for policy people to talk about. I do understand that.
If you ask for regulation, it's pretty easy for me.
It's early.
There's no need for regulation so far,
saying,
and I think in the near future it wouldn't be about regulation, it's just about the technology, I'm sure, because what would always be regulated are consequences of using a certain technology, and you will see that in the future. So, so far we're not talking about any future regulation in this field. My perspective. I do see a big potential blockchain. I'm coming from the copyright sector originally, so I think for digital goods, and we have these two proposals for the directive on tangible and on digital goods from the EU Commission. It makes digital goods identifiable and makes them be unique. So you can even trade used digital goods, maybe, in the future. So blockchain could enable that. And also in the fintech sector, well, it could be possible.
You can trade digital. There's this site called Open Bazaar that does just
that. I know, but it's questionable how they prove that the original copy.
You just said you don't need to regulate technology, so they operate.
Well, I know they operate, but it's about a proof, a technological mean of proof.
For what?
For the uniqueness of a digital data. If you have a blockchain technology, and I'm not an engineer,
blockchain technology does.
I know. That's why it has a very high potential.
And it's happened.
I know but it's not. It's a very small sector so far. It has a bigger potential, like for.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know that there are already some providers, but it's not the real big deal right now.
Within the industry, Vladimir, are you looking at these technologies? Is this something that you and your colleagues are discussing?
Well, actually, I think that you're right that. Blockchain technology is quite prospective one for the future because its application can be relatively much bigger than we have for the moment in banking sector. But my concern, for example, is that banks are too conservative and they see this technology, it's my impression, also as a threat for their current business. So they have to maybe change their business approach, because I think banks in the future, in the digital age, they can disappear because we don't need this intermediate function, let's say, intermediate party. So that's a question. But for me, for example, this technology has a very huge potential. That's my opinion.
Andreas, would you wrap this up for us? Give us your thoughts on where these new technologies are taking us and when.
I don't have the time.
Yeah, we've only got until 12. So.
No, I'm speaking for a company producing industrial IoT edge devices, and our struggle is more the bandwidth at the moment. So we don't even have 5G.
Yeah.
So every technology that's adding bandwidth or adding CPU power need and everything, we tend to avoid. So that's a bit further down the line for us to consider.
What if you were to trade spectrum on blockchain?
Yeah, I like. Okay, yeah. No,
it can happen.
All technologies are, of course, on the table, and but there are also other technologies that are more evolved. And would do the job at the moment, but blockchain is for sure.
What I'd like to do, if I may, is see if there's any chance we can get the four of you back next year, because I want to start at that point and move on.
Only if we speak about drones and IoT in the sky. I'm surprised we haven't mentioned that.
Well, there's so many areas in security and privacy that we could discuss, but it just remains for me to say a huge thank you to Andreas, to Vladimir, to Michael, and to Ioana. Thank you very much for your expertise.